All right, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. I'm Tyler Bailey. I'm a candidate for Columbia City Council at large in the great state of South Carolina. And during my campaign, I'm going to be having talks about issues that are very important to the community with thought leaders who are doing great work, that are very knowledgeable in what they're doing, so that we know issues that we need to address so us as a city can continue to improve and move forward. So tonight I have a distinguished guest with me, Ivory Matthews, who's the CEO of the Columbia Housing Authority, and attorney Michael Littlejohn, who's the founder and managing attorney of Littlejohn Law in Charlotte, North Carolina, but he's from Columbia, South Carolina. He grew up here. So before we get started today, I want both of them to introduce themselves to y'all. Start with Ivory.
Thank you, Tyler, for inviting me to be in this platform. For me, I get super excited to talk about affordable housing, and certainly looking forward to engagement from the audience tonight. I'm Ivory Matthews, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for Columbia Housing.
Thank you, Ivory. And I'm glad you said that. So if you're watching tonight, please, if you have any questions regarding our conversation, we're going to be talking about affordable housing and fair housing in honor of Fair Housing Month, which is April. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask us. Ivory, she's really going to be taking the lead on all things affordable housing, and Littlejohn will be taking the lead on all things concerning fair housing. I'll be asking them several questions, and I'll be chiming in as well. But if you have a question, please comment. I'll post it on the screen and we'll answer it. And Attorney Littlejohn, can you please introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Tyler. Michael Littlejohn of Littlejohn Law. Tyler, thank you so much for inviting me to participate on this panel tonight. I have a practice here in Charlotte, North Carolina, uptown. I handle police misconduct matters, fair housing, employment law, and Title IX cases.
Well, great. Thank you for introducing yourself as well. I mean, both of y'all are really leaders in what you do, and I appreciate y'all taking time away from your families and your evening to talk to me and our guest tonight. So, before we get too deep into the subject matter, I want to talk about just how y'all got to where y'all are today. And starting with you, Ivory, how did you become the CEO of Columbia Housing Authority and get to the position you're at today?
Certainly. So if I had to sum it up in 2 words, I would say preparation and opportunity. And, I have been in the affordable housing industry for a little over 20 years. I started out my career shortly after graduating from college. I landed first opportunity working at the Aiken Housing Authority, and spent about 10 years there. Had the opportunity to do some amazing things, transforming the city of Aiken and addressing the affordable housing needs of the community there. And I left there and landed an opportunity in Toledo, Ohio, where I was the deputy director there, and did some amazing things there with affordable housing and creating affordable housing opportunities. And I realized when I was in Toledo, Ohio, that I'm really a Southern girl to the bone, and I needed to be in much warmer environment. So my husband and I decided to move our family back to South Carolina. And I worked prior to joining Columbia Housing. I was the Chief Executive Officer for Greenville Housing Authority up in the upstate of South Carolina. And this is affordable housing is something that I love dearly. It is one of the most rewarding jobs that I do on a daily basis, because I see the impact that it has on families and their lives. And I couldn't imagine myself doing anything different.
And Toledo is it's cold up there in Ohio, so I'm pretty sure you're glad to be in a little warmer weather back home to your roots.
Absolutely.
My sister is marrying a guy from Toledo, and so
oh wow,
she can have fun at those Thanksgivings. I'll be down here.
Yes, I tell people really quickly, it actually snows from Halloween to Easter. So you have like 8 months of snow there. So
yeah,
certainly glad I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Now, Littlejohn, I'm gonna say a couple things about you first. So you're one of my platforms. I always say that Columbia needs to do a better job retaining our talent, people who are from here. A lot of people who are from here end up moving to places like Charlotte or Atlanta because I believe they think opportunities are better there. The grass is greener across the border. And so you're from Columbia. I believe you may have been born in Charlotte, but you grew up in Columbia. Full disclaimer, you and I, we go way back. We know each other. And we also we work on some cases. We have a civil rights case together right now. But what do you think Columbia could have done to make you stay here and not decide to go to Charlotte? I mean, it's done now, so you don't have to read.
No. I appreciate it. I think for me, Columbia is a place that's, near and dear to my heart. My parents are still there, and it's, I can hit I-77 South and, be there in no time. I think for me, when I was in college, and like you said, I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we ended up moving to South Carolina, when I was relatively young. But, I think the biggest thing for me is I knew I wanted to be in the Carolinas, and I wanted to be, in a city, like your Columbias, like your Charlottes, not really so much, like Atlanta, but I knew I wanted to be in a historic, Southern city that felt, really familiar to me. And for me personally, my parents met in Charlotte. My dad went to Belmont Abbey. My mom went to Winthrop. I learned how to ride my first bike here. My wife and I, we met in law school here in Charlotte. And so, it was one of those things for me was more so of the pool. But I think Columbia, again, is somewhere that, I've always loved. And, I don't want to say I would never come back because, again, I do have, such close ties with the community. My alma mater, Cardinal Newman, and being able to go back to that school and deliver the, graduation speech and see how much that school has grown has been absolutely amazing. And again, I'm not who I am today, but for my relationships in Ridgeway, South Carolina, and Columbia, South Carolina. So, I definitely don't want that to be, fall on deaf ears. As soon as I got here in Charlotte, there are a lot of Columbia folks here, right? And so I don't see too much of a difference, right? I feel like in Charlotte, we got a lot of transplants from, New York or, California. But for the most part, I mean, you're always one or two steps away from like knowing somebody's family, right? Or knowing somebody. And that's kind of the benefit. So I still feel somewhat close to home.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair. But talk a little bit how you got to where you are, the founder of your own law firm and doing the great work in fair housing and civil rights that you do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So for me, I love the two words that Ms. Ivory used. I think for me, I'm a big Nipsey Hussle fan. So my thing is always the marathon continues. And to get to this point for me has been nothing short of that. I went to college. I started off at a college in Greenwood, South Carolina, before transferring to a school right outside of DC, Mary Washington, where I took up political science. And after law school, like I said, I knew I wanted to be back in Charlotte. And so I came back down and, began the process of becoming a lawyer. I was afforded the opportunity to clerk for a very, very historic civil rights firm. When I came into law school, again, I grew up playing sports. I played college basketball for a little bit. And in my mind, I thought I was going to be that Ari Gold sports agent type, right? And so, I was doing things like interning for the Charlotte Bobcats at the time in law school. But it wasn't until I was, granted this scholarship in the name of Julius Chambers. And he's probably one of the most historic civil rights lawyers. When you think of, desegregation of the Charlotte busing, the first integrated law firm, he was, him and his firm, they were integral in that process. And to get that scholarship, not too long after his passing, and again, he went to Chapel Hill, was the first African-American ever on their, first African-American law editor-in-chief of the Law Review, and graduated at the top of his class. For me to get that scholarship, and I know I'm going up against kids from Duke and Wake and all of that, it was nothing short of a blessing. And that summer, to be involved in that type work, I didn't see anything else, other than that. And I knew that this is what I was put here to do. And I'm a very service-oriented person. And so for me, living a life in service and having a career possibly in service, was always the goal, always, what I was going towards. And, that kind of matriculated into me being able to open and establish, my practice here in the city, and to handle, a lot of amazing, cases and be able to help a lot of people. I've been able to handle a lot of the protest case here recently in class actions, and, whether it's an employment law case or a fair housing case or police misconduct case, it's just these culmination of events that allows me to speak to clients, because again, I know what marginalization looks like. I know what discrimination looks like. I know what a lot of these things feels like. And so when you can combine that with the service element, I mean, it's just very natural.
Yeah, and both of y'all work in spaces where you get to really change people's lives for the better. And I think that's a blessing to be able to go to work every day knowing that what you're doing is affecting somebody's life, is affecting families. I mean, and you're leaving a legacy in somebody else's life that you can't quantify with a number. So I appreciate both of y'all for dedicating your lives to serving other people and helping the community, because not everybody does that, and y'all should be commended for doing it. So Ivory, I want to start with you. I want to ask you a question. So what exactly does the Columbia Housing Authority do? In your role as CEO, what does that consist of?
Certainly. Speaking of helping people, the first thing I like to say is Columbia Housing has been around for 87 years. So we just celebrated our 87th anniversary. Housing authorities started during the President Roosevelt administration. And all of us who know a little bit about history, we know that was during the era of transitioning out of the Great Depression. And housing authorities gave people an opportunity to live in quality, affordable housing. There were a lot of families during that time who was living in shacks and in shantyvilles and, houses that didn't have indoor plumbing. And then you had a lot of servicemen and women that were coming back from the war that didn't have quality housing. And so Roosevelt's administration said that we're going to stimulate the economy by creating housing opportunities. And in creating these housing opportunities, we're going to create them in every city, every municipality in this country. And we're going to name them, we're going to create them and give them government grants issued in the form of projects. And so that's where the name projects come from. We're going to provide these projects to this particular municipality. In the state of South Carolina, just like in many states throughout our country, every state had an opportunity during that time to create housing authorities in various municipalities. South Carolina has 37 housing authorities that were created to service families in South Carolina. Some of the housing authorities are created to serve just cities. Some serve multiple jurisdictions, multiple counties, and some just serves one county. Columbia Housing Authority, we actually serve, our official name is the Housing Authority of the City of Columbia because we were created by City Council, but we serve, our service area is Richland County. There are 3,000 housing authorities across the country. A lot of us have transitioned our business strategies from 1930s to today to make sure that we can remain relevant in meeting the affordable housing needs that our families have today. While those needs have transitioned slightly, they still are in the same realm because we still have a section of our population that really needs affordable housing. So Columbia Housing, we serve 6,500 families. Most of our families are families that we serve through what is called the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or some people know it as Section 8 or refer to it as Section 8. And then we also serve another section of the population through our public housing program. The difference between public housing and Section 8 is that public housing is, we own about 1,600 units where families reside in those units whose rents are subsidized through the public housing program. The voucher program, we actually partner with over 1,500 landlords in Richland County, where the federal government provides us with over $30 million a year that we partner with these landlords to provide their units to our families. So we don't own Section 8. The units are owned by landlords. And these landlords are mom and pop, multi-family landlords, so they can come in a variety of forms. And they rent their units to our families, and then we subsidize their rent each month to make sure that the family is not paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. And so we are certainly looking to expand, our opportunities outside of those programs that we operate through the federal government, through a venue where we've created, we have two nonprofit arms, and our nonprofit entities allow us to access private capital and other types of affordable resources to create more affordable housing opportunities for folk, throughout the Richland community.
Wow, I
So
mean,
that summarizes who the Housing Authority is in a nutshell.
yeah, I mean, that's a whole lot. That is a nutshell. And I think a lot of people know when they think about the Housing Authority, they think of what you mentioned regarding the voucher program. I don't think a lot of people knew that even if you are a landlord, if you own property, if you own multifamily properties, that you can partner with the Housing Authority to help provide housing, and you can make some money doing that. In saying that, so if somebody's a landlord and they own their mom and pop, they may own a triplex, a duplex, or a quad. I mean, how would they partner with the Columbia Housing Authority? What's the process?
Certainly, we're actually looking for landlords now. We have the opportunity to. We just recently did a landlord workshop where we were. We had a virtual workshop where we spoke with, I think we had probably about 300 landlords attend our virtual workshop, where we're looking for landlords who have rental property. And that could be a single family unit, a duplex, multifamily units. But if they have rental units that they are looking to lease, we ask that they contact us. We have information on our website. That's on the front page of our website, where we have a landlord liaison at our agency, where we encourage landlords to contact us to communicate with our landlord liaison to get information about how to participate in the program. We have made participation a very easy process because we've streamlined the process by way of having one person assigned to these responsibilities, so that they don't get bogged down in all of the government regulated paperwork that might discourage somebody from participating. But one of the benefits about participating as a landlord on our program is that, for one, we pay on time every month. It goes directly into your bank account. The second thing is we also have maximized our rent structure, so we are paying close to market rent in the community for individuals on the voucher program. And third, if our family experiences any loss of income in their household and we are notified, we immediately adjust the amount of rent that we're subsidizing to the landlord. So we make sure that the landlord is whole each month. So if a landlord is renting to someone who is not on the voucher program and that household loses the income, the family may or may not be able to pay that rent on time, or even make payment, that month. And so that's a guarantee that we have. And so we're certainly looking for landlords.
Yeah, that sounds like a win-win for everybody involved, a win for people in the community, residents, and win for landlords. So I hope any landlords listening, if you have a duplex or apartment complex or a single family home and it's vacant, or if your tenant is about to relocate, consider partnering with the Columbia Housing Authority. You could also, you're going to, like Ivory just said, you will get paid every month. You don't have to worry about chasing down the housing authority. So that's a plus right there.
Absolutely. Can I add this too before you go on?
Yeah,
So for I want to just throw some numbers out because people like to know kind of what the rent looks like. But for a 1-bedroom, our rent structure is $930. For a 2-bedroom, it is $1,059. For a 3-bedroom, a unit is $1,360, and then we go up 4 and 5 bedrooms. So it's pretty close to the market rent, you know, in the Midlands.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the location.
We do a rent reasonableness, but we haven't had any you know, many problems with getting that rent structure to, you know, to our landlords. You know, they haven't been far off. So I think that the best thing to do is just let us know, you know, what your rent is, and we'll certainly try and work our best with you to get that family, you know, in those units. And we have, I actually have about 100 families that have vouchers right now that are on the streets looking for units. And so if you have a unit, please reach out to us.
Yeah. What's the website? You mentioned your website. Can you say the website for everybody?
The website is www.columbiahousingsc.org. That's columbiahousingsc.org.
And I'll be sure to put that in the comments afterwards, so people who are watching tonight or watching later, you'll see that information there where you can log on there. And if you're a landlord looking to renting your property, partnering with the housing authority. Littlejohn, you're the civil rights lawyer, and I know you practice in the area of fair housing. And this is Fair Housing Month. April is recognized as Fair Housing Month. Can you talk a little bit about the Fair Housing Act?
Yeah. So roughly, you know, I would say 53 years ago, 53 years, 11 days, because I think the Fair Housing Act was April 11th, 1968. But you know, Congress enacted the Fair Housing Act. And, you know, I'm not going to go too deep into a history level lesson, but I do think it adds context of, you know, the Fair Housing Act. And so around that time, you know, Congress enacted the Fair Housing Act, and it was considered, you know, one of the last 3 great civil rights laws of the 1960s, along with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act. And, you know, it was led by a movement with Martin Luther King and a number of other people, right, you know, during a very hostile time period of change. And so there were so many forces to divide and segregate, you know, Black and white communities. And one of the biggest ways they did this, of course, you see with law enforcement and employment, was also where people live, where they went home at the end of, at the long day of work. Right, you don't have to worry about interacting with people who don't look like you. And so, in context, this law, the Fair Housing Act, was birthed out of that. So, what is the Fair Housing Act? Essentially, it's an act that protects people from discrimination when they're involved in almost any real estate transaction. So that's renting or buying a home, getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, selling a home. I mean, all of these different activities, asking for an accommodation, all these different activities that whether you're renting or you're buying or you're selling, right? All of these activities within a housing context. I mean, that's how you trigger the Fair Housing Act. And so who does the Fair Housing Act protect, right? Who is it in place for? So, the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, your family status, and disability. What kind of housing is covered by the Fair Housing Act? Well, again, it covers almost, most housing. So you have, the act exempts owner-occupied buildings with no more than 4 units. But for the most part, any other, housing context, whether it's a private or, a public, or you're receiving a subsidy. I mean, all these things are, also entwined with the Fair Housing Act. And so, again, I'm a lawyer in North Carolina. And so there are, North Carolina state specific landlord tenant laws, as I'm sure there is in South Carolina. But, some of the things I'm looking for, or, what triggers this Fair Housing Act is if I see any discrimination or harassment or retaliation, right? Because a lot of times when people are looking at the Fair Housing Act, they may say, oh, okay, well, they're treating this tenant and this tenant differently, or I'm not being, afforded the same access or benefit or as this tenant or this tenant. But other than that, you also have cases of harassment, right? If you have an HOA or you have, other, tenants or neighbors, and they're engaging in this pattern or practice of, harassing conduct. But again, it needs to be based on your disability, your race, your color, your national origin, or if they're retaliating against you, right? If you tell a landlord, hey, I'm going to be reporting you because, I think you're discriminating, and you put in a complaint, or, you go to the housing authority, or, you inform somebody, and your housing provider or, whoever owns the home, if you're renting, if they take an adverse action against you because of that, right, that's retaliation. So, it's going to protect those 3, bottom line things. And so for me personally, I'm looking at, is someone refusing to rent or sell housing? Is someone refusing to negotiate? Is someone refusing to, provide, allow someone to have an emotional support animal, right? To get a wheelchair access. I've seen cases like that. Have I seen, someone falsely deny, right, that a housing is available? You call in with 2 different voices and say your name is 2 different things, right? The availability of the home changes, right? You see instances of that. You see places where, materials are being printed, or whether it's posted on Craigslist or online or a flyer, and it's making statements like, hey, no dogs allowed, no exceptions, right? Well, hey, I mean, I should be treated like any other, tenant in this building, and I just have a disability. I need an emotional support animal. Or, hey, I'm a single mom, and I'm doing this by myself. You can't, of course, discriminate on me because, I'm taking care of the kids by myself, or I might have it doesn't look like what objectively people may deem as a well-rounded home, right? I mean, these are these type things that you'll hear from a day to day. And it's even those slight instances of, what are you inferring, right? Because again, everyone should be entitled, to a living situation. If I'm seeing rent being offered at different amounts, these are all, and again, it's a million different, ways that you can trigger the Fair Housing Act. But again, I mean, the Fair Housing Act was in place, and it was enumerated during a time where, it's really black and whites, really couldn't do a lot of intermingling, especially, in that residential home situation. And then you saw it pop up again here recently with the last election, with them trying to, dial back a lot of these things that the Fair Housing Act granted.
Right. Well, I have some follow-up questions on fair housing I want to ask you, but we have a question from the viewer right now. And Ivory, I believe you can do a good job at answering this question. I'll go ahead and read it. It's from John Wilkinson. He's asking, does the housing authority pay the full amount to the landlord, or does the landlord receive 2 payments, one from the homeowner or the housing authority, and one from the tenant? That's a real good question. And that applies to landlords. How's the structure work, Ivory?
Yeah, so the structure works like this. The tenant is responsible for paying 30% of their adjusted gross income towards rent, and then the housing authority pays the rest. So for example, if we have a tenant that can only pay, just for numbers purposes, can only pay $200 a month is their maximum based on their income, that they are responsible for paying. The tenant and their lease agreement to the landlord, the tenant is obligated to pay their $200, and just say the remaining is $800 to make that $1,000 rent payment each month. The housing authority will make that $800.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then we do have some tenants, very few of our tenants, where we pay 100% of their rent. And of course, like I said, it's just, based on the household, based on the income in the household.
So if I understand that correctly, if a landlord owns a property, the tenant is responsible for paying their portion. So they'll pay that portion to the landlord, and then the housing authority will pay the other portion.
Absolutely. There's two major agreements that exist in this relationship. One of them is a lease agreement, and the lease agreement is between the landlord and the tenant. The housing authority is not a party to the lease agreement. And then the housing authority has what is called a housing assistance payment agreement with the landlord. So we're guaranteeing our payment through that, what we call HAP, housing assistance payment agreement, to the landlord. And then the tenant is making their obligations and commitment through that lease agreement with the landlord.
Okay, I think I understand that, and hopefully John, who asked the question, got that as well, if he's still with us. But moving forward, Littlejohn, I want to ask you a question. Like, how can people know if they are being subject to discrimination? I know you mentioned some examples, and a lot of times, from what I understand, housing discrimination isn't as obvious as some people may think. What are some things people can look for to make sure they're not being discriminated against when they're seeking some housing?
Yeah, I think for me, for the most part, if you leave if you just bought anything, right, that requires you to do some back and forth negotiation, whether it's a car or, you're going to an auction, and, when you leave and you have that feeling like, I just feel like they might have got me on this one, right? You just have that feeling in your stomach. Look into that, really kind of flesh that out, right? And don't jump to conclusions, but really flesh that out. And, some of the things that, it would look like is, hey, if you're making a request, for an accommodation, and again, I like to use this emotional support animal because, again, that guidance is always changing. But, is it, how does it make you feel that you are, entitled to, and you require an emotional support animal, and you are providing all the information that's needed from your doctors, and you're still being told no, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't, something may not be sitting right. And like, hey, I can pay my rent. I can even pay more. I can do everything that any other tenant is doing, right? Hey, we have, neighbors who are, using derogatory or, slang terms, or, hey, everyone in this neighborhood gets to do X action except for me. And you guys have already filed eviction on me 3 times. And then you'll dismiss it right before court. Keep track of that. Again, like you stated, discrimination isn't always, obvious. A lot of times you see with HOAs, and they'll have these Facebook boards and things like that. If you're seeing comments and it's offensive to you, right, it's probably offensive to others in your protected class, regardless of what it, might be, right? Again, the Fair Housing Act, it covers a lot of areas. There's no one set race or color or national origin. Is, are you being treated, for whatever reason, which one is it, and, and why? And again, I think that one of the things that people can look for is, one, how does it make them feel? I grew up trusting my gut. So I would always say, trust your gut. But the second thing is, go to HUD.gov, HUD.gov. I'm going to continue to say this all night, HUD.gov. And, they have, the Fair Housing, Enforcement Office. And again, they will investigate your claims. You can submit a complaint, right? But they're very, very tight, time limitations. So I would encourage anybody to go on the website and contact them. But again, for clients who I help, or people in North Carolina, and people whether I can or can't help them, I always say, hey, you need to at least live on that page, right? Tell a friend, a family member, or anyone, right? Because again, you can be at a high rise in Atlanta, right, paying $3,000 a month for rent, or you can be, in like a mobile home, right? These things will still exist. Social media, home and board, like room boards, Facebook groups. These things can still happen. And, the crux of it is everyone is entitled to live and enjoy their home, right? Like anyone else.
Yeah. Can I like to add just a couple of comments. Okay. So, in our role here at the Housing Authority, we attend a number of neighborhood association meetings and just over my career in general, some of the things that I've heard a lot, when attending those meetings is particularly when the Housing Authority has a property that's in a particular neighborhood or looking to build in a particular neighborhood, we're always asked to do something that is in violation of fair housing. Like the number one ask is for us not to allow young single mothers with small children in our properties. So that's a direct violation of fair housing. Another, and I want to skip a little bit to a misconception. One of the misconceptions that people have just nationally about housing authorities is that we only house young single mothers with small children. We do not allow for a couple to be in a unit, and that's far from the truth. That's another that is a violation of fair housing. And so I just thought I wanted to just mention that as examples of misconceptions and kind of some of the things that I think people, I don't know if people really realize. Sometimes people might they might realize that their requests are in violation of fair housing, and they may not realize that it's a violation of fair housing. And then sometimes people say, you know what, we don't want these units. If you're going to lease to college students, you can't discriminate against college students. You can't discriminate against people for being single and young and having small kids and disabled. All of those things are against fair housing.
Yeah, and I'm over here thinking I can't imagine a landlord even saying that, but I know some likely do, and I'm glad you brought that out. So landlords out there too, if you own some property, and I know sometimes people think college students, all they do is they're loud and drink and cause ruckus. You can't discriminate against people because of their age, their gender, their marital status, and family status, as Littlejohn said as well. And Ivory, I appreciate you bringing that up. And you were talking about going into the neighborhood associations and people bringing requests to the housing authority. And I know a lot of times people have a conception of what they believe the housing authority does. And so what are some common misconceptions you would say about the housing authority?
Well, I would say one is people think that we only provide housing to people who don't have any wherewithal to work for themselves. And so that is far from the truth. People who we provide housing to are folk who work in service sector jobs. They are the people that keep our economy running. They are the people that our chambers of commerces market and talk to businesses about when they want to bring somebody downtown to have dinner or lunch in the Vista or Five Points, okay? And those people who are working there can't live there. They are people who are aging in place, who may have retired from a job where they got very little retirement, or they might just be living completely off of Social Security. Mm-hmm. They are people that have been dealt life cards, such as they've gone through a divorce and have lost income and can no longer support themselves, and so they need our assistance. They may have had a medical event that has caused them to be disabled, and they can't seek additional opportunities to gain the income level at which they were used to, where they didn't need to have this type of support. And so I think just over the years, just like in any situation, when you've got one bad situation that has dominated a media story, and it has perpetuated, and it becomes the reputation of every housing authority in the country. And I will, I know that housing authorities, we certainly have our work cut out for us. We have a huge lift to carry. But what I can say is there are really good people who are deserving of the assistance that we provide, whether it's temporary or whether it's long term. And I don't think it's a person in this world who hasn't had any of the situations that I just mentioned occur to them, and that might not be in a situation one day where they find themselves needing some additional subsidy to live, work, and have a thriving life just like any other citizen in their community. And for us, in because we're very aware of the responsibility that we have to continue to educate the community. This is why we're committed to having these public conversations to continue to dispel the myth about what we do, the impactful resources. Housing authorities are a necessary staple pillar in every community. And, and it's important for every community to ensure that it has a continuum of housing opportunities for everybody. Just because you have low wealth and low income doesn't mean that you should live lesser than anybody else in the community. And so, our job and commitment and our passion is to continue to fight to provide quality, affordable housing for those folk who don't necessarily have a voice for themselves. And so, I can go on and on because I'm certainly passionate about that subject, but I really appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, and my father grew up in public housing in Jersey City, New Jersey, and if it wasn't for the safe public housing that he was able to have, when my grandmother, who was a single mother, working around the clock trying to raise her kids, keep a roof over the house, I wouldn't be where I am today, or even have this platform to have this conversation that we're having. And like you said, Ivory, it doesn't matter your social economic status, how much money you make, your race. Everybody deserves safe housing. Everybody deserves a house. So I appreciate the work that you're doing at the Housing Authority. And I when you were getting past it and fired up right now, I wanted you to keep going because people need to hear that. And I hate the misconceptions and bad reputations that public housing and housing authorities have. So I appreciate you diving into that a little more. We have a question regarding housing for you, Ivory, that I'm going to put up on the screen. And then there's another one regarding fair housing. I'm going to pitch to you, Littlejohn. So the first one is from Benita. She's asking if you're able to speak to resources for single adults without children who are seeking stable housing that the Housing Authority could offer.
Yeah, I would ask her if she would email me. I could certainly give her some information. My email address is Matthews, MATHEWS @columbiahousingsc.org.
And Benita, can you put a thumbs up if you got that email? I want to make sure you have it, and I'll put it in the comments too. But sorry to cut you off, Ivory. Can you keep going?
Yeah, she can. She emails me. I can get her some resources. They kind of change every day, just because depending on the vacancies that exist out there. But we'll certainly get her. We'll certainly get her some referrals to some places that we're aware of.
Thank you. And Littlejohn, sorry to put you on the spot like you're in law school and you have a hypothetical, but you have one coming for you. All right. So we have John Wilkinson who has a question. So does fair housing come into play when a private apartment complex says that they do not cater to students and make requirements like no co-signer if under 21?
Right. I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, for me, I'm going to always defer to say there's excellent guidance with regards to that exact topic on HUD.gov, right? And I would love to be able to answer that, but again, with Tyler and I being in different states, I have to always be cognizant. I don't know, Mr. Wilkinson, if you're in North Carolina, please give me a call. I'll be more than happy to kind of, dive a little deeper. But, I would just really encourage you, Mr. Wilkinson, to go on HUD, that's HUD, HUD.gov. And, I like that website because it outlines, all these cases that, they investigate, and you see so many different examples. And so I just, I would encourage anyone, everyone who, if they're renting or buying, selling, or engaging in any real estate related transaction, to go to HUD. But, that specific comment or a more recent case, 2019, roughly around that time, there's guidance, to that effect on it.
Yeah, and I'll put my lawyer hat on for a second. I would say that I think it could raise a question if that does discriminate. A lot of times, like I said earlier, sometimes discrimination isn't always obvious, but if there's a bunch of hurdles that are in place that can apply to a specific gender, race, family status, or age group, I would say there's an argument that could be in violation of the Fair Housing Act. But Littlejohn is a fair housing expert here. And like I said, go to HUD.gov if you have any questions, and contact a lawyer if you are possibly in that situation or want some more information on that. Ivory, can you email one more time too? Bonita asked again.
Yes, it's IMATHEWS at columbiahousingsc.org.
And Ivory, I have a couple of questions for you that really pertain to Columbia and where we are right now. The first one, a lot of times when people think affordable housing, they always think voucher programs, Section 8. But from what I understand, I believe affordable housing actually encompasses a whole lot more than just those. Can you talk about what affordable housing means today?
Yeah, so, affordable housing is relative, right? So it's relative to your financial situation. So everybody needs something affordable for what they can pay for. And affordable typically is if you take your income and typically, this is banks do the same thing, and they say, when they're certifying you for a mortgage, they typically look at, 30% of your income. And based on that, they try not to set a payment above 30% is what's affordable for you to pay. And so, so affordable is relative to your income. But what I will say about affordable housing is a lot of times people think affordable housing is what the housing looks like, what the housing is built out of. And affordable housing has little to do with the construction itself of the housing than it has to do with the rent structure or the mortgage payment. And so what we try to do at Columbia is we build quality, which means that we're not taking any shortcuts. It's quality affordable housing that meets the standards in our local community. And we just make sure that the unit itself, in most cases, is rental. Rental units are structured in a way that we can set the rents for people who are primarily for the Columbia market, for people who are at 60% or below of the area median income. So, for example, for a family of one, most of our affordable units, that family's income is less than $25,000 a year. So for a family of two, that's $28,000 a year, 28,850. For a family of three, that's 32,450. So based on the family size, we go up from there. So that's typically the range of the households, the range of incomes of the households that we target to provide housing to for Columbia Housing.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's a real good answer. I hope everybody got that. And there's another question I have is, what does affordable housing look like in Columbia 10 years from now? And I know there's a lot of talk today regarding senior housing and other different various forms of housing and where it's going to be. If anybody's from Columbia, they remember there used to be a lot more public housing that was obvious to the eye, whether it was Gonzalo Gardens, Saxon Homes, and a lot of those affordable housing complexes are no longer here. So what does affordable housing look like moving forward in the future?
So from Columbia Housing, I promise you that what we have planned for affordable housing in our current asset repositioning plan, you will not know the difference between affordable and market rate housing if you walked into that community. We will not look like the old Army barrack style housing that, Allen Benedict Court, Gonzalez Gardens look like. Our units are going to look just like the market rate units that are in the communities that they're in. We are just thrilled about the opportunity recently where we have launched a very aggressive reposition and redevelopment plan where we have partnered with 8 of the top reputable affordable housing developers in the country to come and partner with us. We will be touching every single property that we own and land that we own to develop new affordable units and to do comprehensive renovation on units that we can save and rehab. And our goal is to put back all of the units that the Housing Authority has lost over the years due to just a variety of reasons, and mostly due to the reduction in federal assistance that the housing authorities have received just across the country. And we, I would say, in the next 24, 36 months, some of those units are going to start to come out the ground. It does take a while to get all of the financing together because we use a variety of financial resources. Most all of our deals have, anywhere between 5 to 10 different, financial partners, and it really takes time to get it done. But I ask all of you to just be patient with us. We will get it done. My reputation precedes itself. I've got to do it in other communities, and please know I am surrounded by some of the best staff in the country who can help us do this. So I'm not doing this alone. Every single person on my team is playing an integral role in accomplishing this. So I'm glad that question was asked. And we will continue to keep you, the Housing Authority. We're very transparent and open. And, we're certainly putting residents first. And we're going to continue to have those public opportunities to communicate with the public, to provide you with updates, and not only provide you with updates too, as we go into each community and start making a difference, starting to put those new units on the ground. We're going to have a lot of public conversations with charrettes to get that public feedback, because we want to make sure that what we create, the people in that community is proud of the product that we put in that community. So that's our promise from Columbia Housing.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And one of the reasons I am running too is I think we have lost a lot of affordable housing in Columbia, in the city limits that you mentioned. So I'm really optimistic about the great work that the Columbia Housing Authority is doing, and I'm excited to see what the new projects are going to look. When I say projects, I mean the projects y'all are working on in the future are going to look like. I know it's going to be amazing. There's a comment in here that I saw, restoring dignity, and I think that's going to mean the world. Just thinking about, when kids are going to school, getting off of the bus, going to a home where they don't have to worry about somebody trying to pick on them from, who lives in a nicer neighborhood. All that stuff just really weighs on kids, it weighs on their parents, and it weighs on the community as a whole. So I'm excited to see what Columbia's affordable housing is going to look like in the future. And I appreciate you, Ivory, for the leadership and your role at the Columbia Housing Authority, all the great work that you're doing. Littlejohn, one thing I want to run by you real quick, and then I'll let you start off with your closing words too, is housing discrimination. Can you talk a little bit about the damage that housing discrimination does to society, and then your parting words before we get off live tonight?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I feel like, anytime you have any discrimination, right? My biggest thing of, when I handle the cases I handle, I think people should be able to, go about their day-to-day, right? Be able to have very limited interactions with law enforcement, and the interactions they do have, right? They're not treated a certain, way because of how they look, right? Free from those unreasonable searches and seizures. I think people should be able to work, and have jobs and be able to be hired and be able to make a living, right? We talk about this, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We talk about the, just being a part of society, being able to have a job and, work your 9 to 5 or whatever it might be without the threat of, any discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. And the larger piece, being able to have a home, right? We all have, home is one of the most sacred places. You can recall if growing up and you mark your height, right? I'm pretty tall myself. And, these things that make a home so special, cookouts, barbecues, those are, very meaningful things for folks. And, to be able to live and, whether you're paying your rent or you're trying to buy a home, to be able to do so and be treated like everyone else is so, so important. And it's the reason why I do what I do, because, people who get out of line with that, there has to be something to hold them accountable. I've had the opportunity and pleasure to be able to work with a lot of the nonprofits here in North Carolina, the Fair Housing Project, and a lot of other great, organizations, Legal Aid of North Carolina, Pisgah Legal Services, and to have all these things working together, because again, you don't want to see people, living on the streets, right? You want to be able to provide them somewhere to go at the end of, the day when it's cold. And, my outlook on it is we've come a long way, even from when I first started taking these cases. I see more landlords getting trainings, right? I see more property managers getting trainings. I see more, and again, when you're looking at tax credits, there are a lot of things in place that, property owners, people who manage, that they have to do, yearly to be able to continue to have that credit, right? Or, they're going to be, accepting vouchers and things like that. They have to be sticklers on the rules. And so people who, handle those type of properties, they're trying to do it the right way. And it's better than, someone just trying to, take a home, through adverse possession or something like that, right? So, we got all these different pieces trying to work together. And at the end of the day, everyone wants to be a part of this, American dream. And so, I just play a little piece, of that puzzle of accountability and transparency. But I certainly love doing it.
Thank you. And thank you for doing the great work that you do, fighting for those who sometimes don't have a voice for themselves or don't know where to turn to seek justice. And like I said, you go to work every day, you put your cape on, and you help save some lives, and you make a difference in society. And by taking one case, like you said, helps change policy, and it has landlords, like you said, doing training or being mindful of, discrimination, fair housing. So I appreciate the work that you do. And maybe, we can convince you to come back to Columbia, open up office here, and do some work here in the future. So that'll be a goal of mine. I talk about that all the time. We gotta get you back in Columbia. But closing words, Ivory, and then when you give your closing words, and Littlejohn asks you to do the same thing, let people know where they can find you, your social media handles, your email address if you're comfortable giving it, And I'll also make sure to put their information in the comments before we get off.
Certainly. Thank you again for having me, Tyler. And it was certainly a pleasure meeting Littlejohn as well. My closing words would be, here at Columbia Housing, our number one goal is to make sure that we create affordable housing opportunities where people can live, work, and thrive as any other citizen in our community. And that's the goal that we're working towards. I would also ask, I'm going to take this opportunity to, if Tyler, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're going to have this type of venue in the month of June is homeownership month, I would love to ask us to participate in that conversation, because we have some very good information that we like to share about our homeownership program, because we do help a lot of first-time families realize their dream of homeownership. And last but certainly not least, how to reach me. The best way to reach me is via my email address, which is imatthews@columbiahousingsc.org. You can also, I'm on Facebook. I think I'm Ivory Matthews on Facebook. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And I'm Ivory, I think Williams Matthews on LinkedIn. And very seldom do Twitter, and I don't hardly do Instagram. But you could certainly reach me on the platforms that I just mentioned. I enjoyed tonight's event, and thank you so much for having me.
And we'll have you back in June. I appreciate you volunteering right now. So I already know everybody on my team who's helping me out. June is homeownership month, and Ivory Matthews will be back with us. Littlejohn, go ahead, man.
Thanks, Tyler, and Miss Ivory. It was such a pleasure listening to you tonight. I do want to take a moment and say, Tyler, I mean, this is an amazing event you've put on tonight, and I really do hope that people have gotten something. A lot of times we tend to focus on, the qualified immunity, the police misconduct, or employment, or, all this, superficial, or, just things that, is in the larger grand scheme of things. Yes, we want to see overall change, but something that, depending on part, most of the people who are on this call, if you're at home watching this, but I mean, what you're talking about right now is so important, and it's something that gets glossed over so much. And I think it speaks to your character. And I've had the pleasure of knowing you for quite a while, right? And to see you to be a pillar of your community, and to see what you've represented and continue to represent it in Columbia and across South Carolina as a whole. It was just, when I got that invitation to participate tonight, I just want to say, please keep doing what you're doing. Folks here like me and others here in Charlotte, North Carolina are definitely watching. You as well, Ms. Ivory. And I think that, listening to both you all, like I said at the top of the meeting, the marathon continues. I am lucky to be on a call with, two amazing souls who are running their marathon, and they're running their marathon for people, in Columbia and the surrounding area. And it's, absolutely amazing, to see. If you want to get in contact with me, if you live in South Carolina, get in contact with Tyler, and then he'll get in contact with me, and then we'll do that. If you're here in North Carolina, you probably most likely already have my contact information. If not, you can get in contact on Instagram, and there's a million different ways. Email mll@littlejohn-law, but not that hard to find. But again, I appreciate it, Tyler. Thanks for everything. This speaks volumes to really hit on the topics you hit on tonight.
No, thank you, Littlejohn and Ivory. Thank both of y'all for taking time this evening to talk to me and everybody else. I really appreciate it. We'll have y'all both back for something. I know Ivory's already volunteered for June. Littlejohn, I'm gonna find a way to get you back on here. It'll probably be something else in the social justice, civil rights area, because I know the great work that you do, and keep that up. And everybody, I appreciate y'all taking time away for your night to watch us on live. Again, I'm Tyler Bailey. I'm a candidate for Columbia City Council at large. To learn more about my candidacy, my campaign, to volunteer or donate, please visit tylerforcolumbia.com. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm everywhere: LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I'm not big on Snapchat or TikTok, but you can probably still find me there. All right. Or if you just Google Tyler Bailey, you'll see my information. Y'all have a good night. I'll make sure to put Ivory and Attorney Littlejohn's information on the comments so you can go back and get it. And stay tuned to what the Columbia Housing Authority is going to be doing. I look forward to seeing the future of affordable housing, and y'all will see Attorney Littlejohn making waves and really helping out people across South Carolina, North Carolina, and the nation. I'm throwing that out there. All right, so y'all have a good night, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good night.